Hey everybody, hope you're well. This is another video in a series where I'm going through my kitchen and talking about my coffee gear. Now, like I've said before, I try to be pretty intentional with the stuff that I have in my home. So if it's not useful, I don't really like to keep it around. Last time I talked about the Haru V60 that I have, the little tiny one in red ceramic. And it's a really efficient small brewer for doing single cups of lighter roasted single origin coffees and makes those taste really delicious. Today, I wanted to go all the way to the opposite end and talk about the biggest thing I have to make coffee in my kitchen, which is the Chemex. Now, I don't have to spend so much time talking about aesthetics with the Chemex. It's in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, so you can see it there, and it's all over pop culture on TV shows, and a quick Google search will show you all the places that it's ever been. And it's just kind of a staple of American coffee culture. This Chemex was a wedding gift to my wife and I, and appropriately enough, we've used it on the weekends to brew coffee for the two of us. It's really good for two 10-ounce or 12-ounce cups of coffee. You can get it in a 3-cup, 6-cup, 8-cup, 10-cup, and if you go for like hand-blown, then you can find them in other sizes, like a weird kind of 5-cup version. For most people, the 6 to 8 is the most practical. The 3 is really like a single cup brewer, which doesn't really do as good a job as the V60 or Kalita Wave in my opinion. The 10-cup brewer is really something that I like to use more for big batches of iced coffee. I've done that in the past, but it just takes up so much space. It's really not worth it unless you're really into making big batches of iced coffee. Chemex also has a lot of other interesting things on their website. They have the Funnex, they have the Chettle. I think it's supposed to be kettle, but it just looks like Chettle. And a slew of other things. Some are more interesting than others, and you just kind of have to make the call for yourself whether they're worth trying out or not. So while this recipe is for the 6-cup Chemex, you could definitely scale it up for an 8 or a 10, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. For this recipe, I'm going to use the white paper filter. There's also brown paper filters, metal filters available, as well as cloth filters. I'm using 30 grams of coffee for this recipe, and I'm grinding it just a little bit coarser than I would for the V60. On my grinder, it's about 2 steps coarser. I'm gonna bloom using 3 times the weight of the coffee. So for 30 grams of coffee in, I'm gonna bloom with 90 grams of water. I'm gonna let it sit for about 45 seconds to a minute, depending on the coffee. And I'm actually not gonna agitate. I'm just gonna let the water do the work to fully saturate everything. The reason I avoid agitation with the Chemex is because agitating will actually slow your brew down just a little bit. And with the Chemex, using a paper filter anyway, that's going to slow down your brew quite a bit. So I don't want to mess with that anymore and get more papery, dry flavors coming out. Another issue specifically with the paper filters is that they're pressed up against the wall. So there's really nowhere for the water to go except for the opening at the bottom and then where the spout is. So after the bloom is done, we're going to pour up to 250 grams and then wait for about 10 or 15 seconds just to let everything level off. Then we're going to continue doing 50 grams at a time until we reach 500 grams of coffee. At the end of the brew, I like to give a little tap on the side just to level everything off so that the drawdown is nice and even. Pouring should be done in about 4 or 5 minutes. If your pour is taking a little bit longer, you can up the bloom a little bit. So maybe go to 4 times or 5 times the weight of coffee used. And that will help speed up the process a little bit. You can definitely go coarser on your grinder as well. But if you go too coarse on a home grinder, the grind's gonna be really inconsistent. So after doing a couple steps coarser, if you're still not getting the time that you want or the flavors that you want, then try messing with the bloom. Now people will argue all day, well, maybe they won't argue all day, but people debate whether or not to squeeze the filter at the very end. So kind of ball it up and squeeze it. I would say that if you're using a darker roasted coffee, definitely avoid it. And then if you're using a lighter roasted coffee, maybe. It's important to remember that the grind size, the brew ratio, and the amount of time it takes to brew the coffee are the biggest factors in flavor. Now, while doing little tweaks like squeezing the filter at the very end can take you from an A to an A+ cup, it's not gonna do you much good if you're not there yet. So all that to say, what is the Chemex actually good at? It produces a nice mellow cup of coffee without a ton of acidity, and it looks really nice. It's a great piece to keep in your kitchen. You could argue that a Chemex is great for the first cup of the day. You could also argue that the Chemex is a really nice way to round out a nice meal out. A lot of coffee nerds love to hate the Chemex because it doesn't have that acidity, and for some coffees it doesn't really keep it in balance, and the cup is not the ideal cup. But you can't ignore from a hospitality standpoint how nice it looks when you bring out a cup of coffee with the Chemex and serve it to friends or family, and the kind of warm feeling that you get from it. And that's the reason why it was on our wedding registry and why we're probably never going to get rid of it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.